Providing insights to help you grow your business, improve yourself, and add value to those around you. You're listening to the Success is a Choice podcast, where you get a peek into the lives of industry leaders as they share their stories with you.
Everybody, thank you for tuning into the Success is a Choice podcasting network for our Coachable Coach series. Today's episode is made possible by the leadershipplaybook.com. We all want strong and a healthy culture. The best way to have a good culture is by having great teammates and positive leaders. That's where the leadershipplaybook.com can help you out. In fact, you'll get 25% off the price when you use coupon code CHOICE. As in, success is a choice. So whether you're a coach, administrator, parent, or student athlete, you'll want to visit the leadershipplaybook.com and use coupon code CHOICE to get 25% off. Well, the Coachable Coach series is where we talk with a coach who values growth, improvement, and leadership, not with just their athletes, but for themselves as well. Professional development, not just so that they can be better, but so then they can be better for their athletes. Good coaches, they might know the X's and O's, the tactics and the strategy that lead to winning, but great coaches know their athletes. And today we have quite the coach for you. We want to welcome in Michael K. Thompson. Coach Thompson is a Michigan high school softball coaching Hall of Famer. He's a big deal. He's won more than 500 games in his career. He's also the author of the book, The Softball Trip, and he is on the MHSCA. I don't know if I got those initials right, but he's on the softball executive board. He's a big deal in the state of Michigan. So Michael K. Thompson. Coach Thompson, welcome to the show.
Hi, Jamie. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I get tripped up with all those initials. But yeah, so you've been doing it for a while. You've been very successful at a number of different places there in Michigan. But as we think of success, definition of success, this show is called Success is a Choice. Most people would say you've been successful because you've won more than 500 games in your career. But what do you look at when you look at the word success?
Well, that's a great question, Jamie. So I actually had this question. I had a conversation with my class today. Our football team, and I don't coach football anymore, but our football team is playing a game this weekend against a team that's pretty darn good. And so I asked them today, how are you going to gauge success? And some of the kids said, well, winning the game. And I said, well, wait a second. So you're going against a team that's going to be really good. Is there another way you might gauge success here? And so then we started some dialogue and said, well, if we play our best game of the year, if we prepare well this week and we play our best game this year, we play our best that we played, even if we don't win, then we know that we have been successful because we did what it took to give our best. So I look at it kind of the same way, is that did you make progress? Did you get better? Did you, I think about this every day. So I made my bed today. So I was successful at that. And so I do the same thing with my students. So, we win more games than we probably should because of the way we develop our culture and develop our leadership. But at the end of the season, you ask yourself, have we been successful? Well, did we have fun? Did we improve? Did we meet the majority of our goals? Did we do well in school? Did we not get in trouble? Were we respectful in the community? Are our parents proud of us? And so really kind of gauge success that way.
Well, you mentioned growth. You mentioned improvement a number of times there in that answer. Most people would say, well, if you want to improve, well, hit better, field better, throw better. But you do more than just the X's and O's. Obviously, you know how to teach certain drills, but what are some things you're doing beyond the X's and O's to improve the team as you talk about?
All right. So I was in a seminar a couple years ago with one of my favorite coaches, who is Tony Dungy. And so I was in that interview, or in the session we were doing. One of the things that Coach Dungy said, that if you're only coaching to win the game, you're only doing half of your job. And that really struck me as something that was very insightful. So our philosophy is we need to coach the person first before we coach the athlete. Yes, we have to develop our talent. And yes, that's why we do open gyms and have camps and lift weights and do all these things. But it's a lot more than that. It's so important for us to have a championship culture. It's so important for us to develop good leadership. So for me in my program is that I have a 10-week leadership program that my captains go through. And they learn how to be a leader by example. They learn how to be a vocal leader. They have to do exercises. They get to practice their skills. One of the reasons that I do this is because, there just aren't as many good leaders in our world right now that we need. And the truth is about developing leadership is that it's something that you have to learn. I actually think it's sort of a crime for us coaches to name our captains without training them. It's like asking, you, Jamie, to speak Swahili when you've never heard the language before. And that's what some of us coaches do when we're naming our captains, is that, okay, so you're a captain. Okay. Well, now what? And so, young people, they need to be taught, what does it mean? What does a good leader look like? Or what do you do? What do you say to a kid who's struggling? What do you say that a kid who's having a bad practice, or whatever the case might be? And a lot of people just don't know. And so with our leadership program, we really invest the time into developing our leaders so they can lead our teams. So that's really important to me. And, having good leadership on your team, it just doesn't happen by accident. We have to be very intentional about the way we develop our kids.
Yeah. A lot of times on teams, especially at the high school level, well, if they're a good player, if they're a good kid, they don't steal from Walmart, then, hey, congratulations, you're a captain.
Another thing is that some young people, they look at their other leaders and they try to mimic their behavior. And some people, when you get the title, and leadership is not a title. Being a captain is not a title. It's a responsibility that you have. Some kids just think they have to yell all the time because that's what they know. And boy, that's not the case at all. We as coaches know that there are kids that you can yell at and kids that you can't, and then everything in the middle. And it's our duty as coaches to know each one of those kids, but it's also the duty of our leaders to get to know their teammates so they know how to handle each kid individually. If I have a shortstop that is having a bad day and boots a bunch of balls and has a bad attitude or whatever, my leaders need to know what's going to make that kid tick so they can handle them correctly and not just yell, because, again, some 21st century teenagers just don't respond that way.
So give us kind of a tangible, give us one, maybe, or two, or however many you want, but you said you do it like a 10-week training program for your leaders, for your captains. Give us maybe one tangible type thing that you do to train them, to help them. Maybe the thing that stands out the most, that's a mistake that captains make, or just something that you're most proud of, maybe.
All right. There are sort of two. So in the commitment chapter that we do, what they have to do is they have to really, they have to understand what their own commitment is, and understand that in order for them to be effective, they have to be at least at the compelled, or at least at the committed level. But they also have to understand what a resistant kid looks like, or an existent kid. Like, for example, the existent player, their biggest contribution to their team is showing up for the team picture. That's their biggest contribution. And those are the kids that they don't get anything out of it because they don't put anything into it. And so those are the kids that I suppose in some respect your team needs, but they're not in it with both feet. And so in the commitment chapter, they really have to understand those kids and how to bring them from that kind of resistant or kind of existent stage up to a more committed or even compelled stage. So that is one of those really cool things. The other chapter that I really like is the composure chapter. And a lot of your listeners, a lot of your coaches know, Jamie, the green, the yellow, and the red, the traffic light analogy with their emotions. Obviously the green is when you're playing well and you're feeling good and you got the right socks on and everything is good with you for the day. The yellow is when you start to turn and you're starting to get frustrated and somebody's yelling at you and your folks didn't bring you the right color Gatorade and things like that. And then the red is obviously when you're so frustrated and you're upset with yourself and you're not playing worth a dang, and you might as well, the other team doesn't even need to play you anymore because you've already beaten yourself. And so that chapter with the kids really helps my leaders understand in themselves what their traffic light looks like, because sometimes you only get 4 seconds before you got to turn it over and be ready for the next pitch. And so my kids learn how to handle their own emotions, but also later, they also need to figure out everybody else's colors and the fact that these colors are contagious. And so my leaders get good enough usually that where they can tell that Susie is in the green or Susie is in the yellow and she's starting to turn, or she's in the red, and boy, man, I better go talk to her because, those colors, those traffic lights are just so toxic when, you're frustrated. But those 2 chapters are really, really good. The composure and the commitment chapters are really fun to work with.
So in thinking back on your career, are there some mistakes or some things that you've did that you wish you had done differently or that you've learned from through the years? Life's really too short to make all the mistakes ourselves. So let's learn from Coach Thompson and learn what not to do, or maybe just some challenges you had to overcome in coaching.
Yeah. So, and this would be kind of advice that I would also have for younger coaches who listen to your show, Jamie, is that when I was younger, I'm in my early 50s. When I was younger, I worried a lot more about wins and losses than I probably should have. Mm-hmm. And as I got older, just like I mentioned with the Tony Dungy quote, that it's not about that. You are going to win more games if you have a great culture and you have great leadership. There is no doubt about that. But as a younger coach, I think I worried about that too much. And we still won, but I was, kind of miserable. So in 2014, there was an incident where I had to dismiss a couple of kids. And that summer, in the summer of 2014, I went, well, why did that happen? When what I discovered, Jamie, is that when I dismissed those kids, it wasn't their fault. Now they did something that they shouldn't have done. And, but what I discovered, Jamie, it wasn't their fault. It was my fault. Now I didn't, encourage the things that they did or anything like that. But what I hadn't done is I hadn't created a culture of accountability within my program. And before 2014, for example, all the bad practices and all the any problem that we had, it was up to me to make sure that I got it solved. Well, after 2014, after this incident, what I discovered is that there's a better way. And so what I did is I started to teach the kids how to be accountable to each other. And so, and also developing my leaders so they would hold each other accountable, and it wasn't everything dictated by me. So over the last 10 years, things have been fantastic because, I'm intentional about developing this and developing the culture, but I've also created a culture of accountability within the team with my leadership kids. And so they are now policing each other. And so they're holding each other accountable. They create their own sets of standards for their behaviors and practices and games and their social life and their academics. And so they, any little brush fire, my leaders will put out. Before 2014, everything was dictated by me. But now, if you have a player-centered team and with good leadership, and then you start sprinkling in some talent to go along with that, boy, some good things are going to happen then. But yeah, 2014 was a turning point for me. And again, if you have young listeners, young coaches here, Jamie, continue to learn. And you don't know it all. And coach the person. And yeah, you need to know your sport. You've got to know the ins and outs of hitting and fielding. And if you're a basketball coach, your 3-point shooting and whatever, you have to know that stuff. But coach the person and create a culture of accountability within the program. and train your leaders and partner with your leaders so they know what makes you tick as well.
So what we've talked a little bit about your student athletes and the importance for them to grow and develop as people, as leaders. What are you doing to grow and develop as a leader so that you have more to pour out into other people?
Well, I'm a voracious reader. And so I've got books upon books upon books. But, reading about sports theory and coaching theory and all these techniques and stuff, that's one thing. But talking to people is really, really helpful too. So there are a number of mentors that I have had that have been helpful. It's like, okay, Mr. Cox, what do I do with this? How do I, what should I do here? So seeking advice and reaching out to others has been really helpful for me. And just, and I don't know if I would have done this, Jamy, in 2013. If you're going to, in 2013, you're going to ask me to listen to some leadership guy, or if you're going to listen, Mike, I want you to go away and I want you to learn about team culture and what I'm winning. I don't need to do that. But so it's so important for us to continue to grow as coaches and talk to people that know what they're doing, and to look at, great. One of my favorite programs is at Alabama. And so I know I have never met Patrick Murphy, but I do as much stuff that has inspired me from Coach Murph. And I have a Mudita sticker on the back of our helmets that I got from, and the story of Mudita from talking to Coach Murphy. But just continue to grow, as nobody knows it all. And it's important for us to continue to get better all the time.
Well, for those people that maybe aren't softball people that are watching this, basketball coaches, educators, or whatever, that really aren't familiar with the Mudita story or the Mudita phrase, share a little bit about that, because, Coach Murphy, as you mentioned, amazing coach, has had a lot of success down there at Alabama, but he's not Nick Saban. So, it seems like Nick Saban's the only coach at Alabama sometimes, or was the only coach at Alabama, but there's other good coaches there. Patrick Murphy is one of them in the softball program, but Mudita is their slogan that they use all the time.
Well, what Mudita is it's ancient Sanskrit. And what it means is vicarious enjoyment of somebody else's success. And when Murph did, I might even have been your podcast or your episode, Jamy, where he talked about his team on 2009 with Brittany Rogers and Jaslyn Lunsford, who, and the Brittany Rogers story. Anybody who knows anything about softball and college softball knows the Brittany Rogers story, where Coach Murphy took her out of the game. She's 4-time All-American. It's bottom of the fourth. They're down a couple runs, and Coach puts in a freshman for this 4-time senior leader. She's 4-time All-American. She's a great player. And so Jaslyn goes up to the plate and she takes a couple of whacks, and Brittany Rogers could easily have walked to the other end of the dugout and stuck pins in her Coach Murphy doll for taking me out of the game. But she didn't. She was on the top step cheering. And then Jaslyn, continues to battle. And then she ends up hitting a home run. And Brittany Rogers, sure enough, is the first one out of the dugout. She's the first one to tackle Jazz at the plate. And it's just a great example. And it's on YouTube. It's called Anatomy of a Teammate. It's just Brittany caring more about the team's success than her own success. And so I've tried to instill that in all of my players. Look, you need to be happy when Ava hits a home run. I mean, you be happier for her than you are for yourself when you do it. So that's the concept of Mudita. It's special. And what Murphy said in the podcast is that there's not an English translation for it. There's not a word in the English language that means the same thing. And so, and when Coach Murphy saw this, when he saw the word Mudita, he goes, "Oh my gosh, there's a word for it. This is what I've been looking for to communicate to my kids." And we did a chapter in the softball trip called Mudita that relates that story. And I hope that everybody gets a chance to read it.
Yeah. Now I like how you use the phrase, or you use the name Ava. I happen to know your team a little bit. And you've got what, 3 or 4 Avas on your team?
We had 3 Avas last year. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's an easy name to use in examples oftentimes. But you talk about the softball trip, holding it up here for the people on the audio, people listening to this on audio, just imagine a beautiful book cover and a beautiful book that you need to go out and buy. But the softball trip, you wrote that. You are an English teacher as well as being a softball coach. So you are an academic person. I was just like a gym teacher person. I was just a knucklehead when I was a coach, but you're actually an English teacher. But you have more books in the works?
Well, let me go back to the softball trip for a second, Jamie. So the idea came obviously from your bus trip, right? So when I read your bus trip, I'm thinking to myself, what a great story this is, and these characters and how they're developing as teammates. And boy, wouldn't this be cool if we could change this into a softball story? And I immediately, when I was reading about Jalen and Demetrius in your book, I'm going, okay, I can see this character and this kid and translating it into a softball story. So yeah, that was really fun to do. And I can't wait to get on to the next one. There's one character in the text. Her name is Piper. She is their shortstop. And it was really exciting to write about that particular character because that's a character who gets it. I mean, she knows what good leadership is all about. And so I can't wait to get on to the next one and continue her story because she's going to become a first-year coach in this next story. And we all know what being a first-year coach is really like. None of us have any idea what we are in for in that first year until after we get started. A lot of first-year coaches just think it's practice plans and games and that's it. And we all know very well that there's so much more involved in being an effective coach than just drawing up a practice plan and going to games a couple of nights a week.
Well, in the coaching industry, you're talking about, you talk about Piper, the shortstop in the book, The Softball Trip, and her being a joy to coach, her being, the coach's dream, a coach's favorite, so to speak, to use a colloquial phrase. But there's going to be some people once in a while that we shake our heads about, or we bang our heads against the wall, challenging people, whether it's players, staff members, maybe it's our boss. I know it wouldn't be any bosses that you have at Frankfurt High School, but your bosses, maybe it's parents. What do you do? How do you handle or work with challenging people? If there's any good advice that you have.
All right. So the most challenging groups of people that I work with are players and parents and yes, coaches too. So you think in terms, at least for me, of like a 3-legged milking stool. And so parents are part of your culture, whether you like it or not. And so we need to embrace that. There's no doubt about that. So one thing that's really helpful for us is with players, we do player standards. And we're fortunate enough to be able to go to Florida with my high school kids for spring training. And we're really lucky to be able to do that. And I have all the kids there. And one of the things that we do on one of the nights is we bang out our standards of behavior for academics, for social life, for games and practices. And they're mutually agreed upon. And at the end of that, we have a great signing party where we all sign our names to what we agreed to do. That really stems off any sort of really bad kind of behavior that we have in school or in social life or in games and stuff. But I also do something similar with parents. So in a perfect world, getting all your parents together and deciding what is acceptable behavior and what's borderline and what's non-negotiable and what's commendable and all this stuff, getting your parents all together at one time is kind of a logistical nightmare. So what I've done over the last 30 years of coaches, instead of just bringing them in, I've just kind of written them down in these 5 different kind of phases. Like, in all honesty, sometimes parents don't always know what great behavior looks like. And so when you write it out for them and give it, these 5 kind of tiers, if you want to call it that, the commendable, the acceptable, the borderline, the unacceptable, and the non-negotiables, and you share that with them. And at my travel ball practice, I actually read it to them before our first travel ball practice. And so we all come to an understanding of how things should go. If they have any questions or concerns, or they want to add something to the parent standards, then they can. And so the biggest problem that I end up with parents sometimes, that I've seen with parents and coaches who have problem with parents, is them just not knowing. And they just don't know. It's not anybody's fault, but there's been a communication breakdown. So with this 3-legged milking stool, the standards are very, very helpful. So my parents know what to expect out of me, that because I do coaching standards of my own and I share them with our parents. So there's no doubt about what our roles are as far as what their role is, player's role, coach's role. And Jamy, I sometimes find when coaches say to parents to stay in your lane, I actually find that a little insulting, because parents are part of your culture and you have to embrace that. And so I think my parents really respect the fact that I take the time to invest in parent standards and coaching standards for myself and standards for players. So to answer your question about, conflicts and struggles and stuff like that, getting out in front of those things is really about prevention. And so we have open communication with that. And so I really don't run into a lot of problems because it runs pretty smoothly.
Sure. Now you are, you're the president of Great Lakes Leadership. What is what is your company? What do you do? Because you're a full-time English teacher, you're a full-time, or you might not be paid like a full-time softball coach, but you're a full-time softball coach. You're a full-time coach, teacher, but you also have this where you're pouring into others. You're pouring into other teams. Talk a little bit about what you're doing with other teams, and then your podcast as well to go along with the book that you authored. Sure.
So Great Lakes Sports Leadership, what we do is we travel around. Right now it's largely Michigan, where I'm located in northern lower Michigan. And so I travel around to area schools, and I do usually it's 2 sessions. I do one session with the school's developing leaders. These are the movers and the shakers, the kids who are going to make a difference in your season. And we go through some self-evaluation process. We talk about, the model for leadership by example and being a vocal leader. I share the Brittany Rogers video is in there. There's a really cool self-leadership game that is involved in the leadership session with the players. It's 75 minutes. I do another one for their coaches, where the coaches get to evaluate one of their leaders who came to one of the earlier sessions, and they get to pick out what kind of leadership strategies they're looking for out of their kids. They have to, one of our discussion points is how you select leaders. I mean, do you vote for them, or do you take them out of a hat, or do you invest the time in developing them? I mean, so I travel around Michigan to different high schools and organizations, and I meet with developing leaders, but also with their coaches. We do a couple of other services. We have sessions in commitment. We have sessions in composure. I have gone to several schools and actually run their parent meeting for them and given them exactly, what the coaches believe in. I love doing the culture material with schools. That's a 2-hour session where I will take one of your teams. I just got done doing one with a girls volleyball team that's not too far away. And we did the 2-hour session with them developing their own standards of behaviors. I modeled it for them. We talked about why you're doing this. And this was the latest one I did was back in August. And I will tell you right now that this volleyball team that I worked with is ranked number 1 in Division 4. And I got a message and I keep in contact with Kristen, and I've talked to her several times over the last couple of months to just check in, see how they're doing. And they are crushing it right now. Their atmosphere is great. Their culture is great. And I can't wait to go back there. She is so excited about what those culture posters and building that championship culture has done for that team. The podcast is kind of sort of in its infancy right now. I'm reaching out to coaches and athletic directors, and we just sit down and talk for a half hour or so about their leadership style, what can we do for coaches? What can we do for kids? What are you doing that maybe I'm not doing, or somebody else can learn from? I've interviewed first-year coaches. I've interviewed veteran coaches. I've interviewed Hall of Fame coaches. Had a great conversation with Presley Kresge, who was the all-time three-point shooter at Central Michigan when she played women's basketball. She gave us some really good insight about what it means to be recruited. And so that is really valuable information for kids who are looking to play at the next level. And so obviously I have my Twitter handle that you've been posting here and some other things. And it's been really fun.
Well, speaking of good insights, Coach Michael K. Thompson has given us that. If you know a coach, it doesn't even have to be a softball coach. If you know a coach, an educator, a leader, share this episode with them. Let them know about this. They don't have to be a softball coach. We did not get in the weeds of softball today. So we have a great softball coach on, a Hall of Famer, but we didn't get in the weeds. Share this episode, share this show with somebody that is a coach that works with youth. I think it can be very helpful. Coach, thank you for all that you're doing. Thank you for joining us today. For all of you watching this, listening to this, we appreciate this. Like I said, share the show, like it, tap that little thumbs up button, whatever you want to do. But until next time, remember that success is a choice. What choice will you make today?